Thank you. Thank you. So everyone can hear me okay, right? I first want to say thank you. I have to read this because it's a very long name. I'd like to say thank you to the Center for Trust, Peace, and Social Relations. You know, I did a radio show this morning with the BBC, and thanks to Charlotte. Where is this Charlotte? Charlotte's like hiding out. You know, she made me get up at the crack of dawn to go get on the radio program this morning. And as I was telling people earlier, they wanted to talk about West Wing, a little about Donald Trump, and about tattoos. So it was very entertaining to be here. But I'd like to thank Matt for having me. We've known each other for, you know, since I was 6 years old. That's not like I'd say, because if I say 20 years, you'll think I'm an old man. But I'd like to say 6 years. And I'd like to thank Charlotte, who's not in the room, but Charlotte has been wonderful. She's taken care of everything to get me here, and so I greatly appreciate that. I always love to come across the pond. Do you guys still say that, across the pond? Is that what it is? You know, there was this urban legend in my family that I like to go around saying that I was Native American or had some Native American in me. Because in the United States, if you're Native American, you get to, in theory, if you're Cherokee or Choctaw, you get to be part, you can own a casino, right? And I'm thinking, okay, that's how I'm going to get rich. I'm going to own a casino, you know, take money from all these poor souls. And all my friends kept saying, Dane, you're as white as snow. There's no way you could have any Cherokee or Native American in you. And so I said, okay, I'm going to prove you wrong. So I went to Ancestry.com. Do you guys have that around here, Ancestry.com? And I took the $99 DNA test, and it came back that I was 63% English, 15% Irish. Okay, so that makes up 78% of me. And I can assure you there was absolutely no Native American of any kind to me, so it was really sad. But so being 78% United Kingdom, is that what we say here? Do I say British or just British? Okay, I'm 78% British. That I feel at home here. And I could be related, because actually some of my ancestors, because I went back. It's not British? Well, that's why I'm asking the expert, you know. Thank you. Thank you for correcting me that. You know. Okay, you know what? Are they here to hear about my genealogy? Which is true. Yes, I think they are. But all I know is that, is this Lake, what is it? LEI, Leicester? What is it called? The city near here? What is it? Leicester. There are more syllables, more letters in there than that. But my relatives, when I traced it back through my genealogy to like 1095, that some of my relatives were from there. So I'm close to home, you know. So I feel at home. So a little background. I know this is very boring already, so it's all I'll leave. But I got involved in politics. You know, when Ronald Reagan was president, you know, I was enamored with politicians. I mean, I don't know what it was about Ronald Reagan. Everyone talks about Ronald Reagan being this great American and a great orator, and he was. So when I was younger, I went to a rally that he held in Birmingham, Alabama. It was just a very exciting moment, and I held Ronald Reagan, like every elected official, in like complete awe, like, oh my God, you know, these people, you know, hung the moon. So after, and hopefully this won't, you know, embarrass anybody, but afterwards I went to the men's room, right, in the hotel. It was the Hyatt Hotel in downtown Birmingham, and I walk in there, and I'm standing at, you know, the stall, for lack of a better term, and in walks Ronald Reagan. Okay, and he stands in the stall next to me. And I have to say it was a little awkward when this man's talking to me, you know, standing in the stall next to me. I mean, but it made me realize that, you know what, he's really no different than I am. I mean, he goes to the bathroom, he puts his clothes on the same way I do, and it really gave me a healthy perspective of politicians and elected officials. And I think it's really helped me. It really kind of solidified my desire to be in politics, because I thought that, you know what, I shouldn't be afraid of these individuals. I shouldn't feel like I'm not qualified or good enough to be in their presence. It made me realize that, hey, you know what, I'm just like they are. Of course, he's a little taller than I am, so nothing I can do about that. But it was a very awakening moment. And when Matt asked me to give this talk, and I didn't realize this, you know, we talked about how, I'll just say Brits, because, you know, easier. Brits love House of Cards. How many of you guys watch House of Cards? Okay. By the way, I have not seen the current season, so no spoilers, okay? But I tell you, I had dinner one night with Bo Willimon, who's the creator of House of Cards, and Ken Burns. How many of you guys know Ken Burns? No, and it's sad in the United States. He's a well-known guy. He's a documentarian. He did the documentary on baseball and on the Civil War, and he actually had just finished, this is like, I don't know, 9 months ago or a year ago, he had just finished this documentary on the Roosevelts, you know, Teddy and Theodore and Eleanor. And so we're sitting there at dinner, and we were talking about Bo, where do you get these thoughts or ideas from House of Cards? And he said, all I have to do is look at the presidencies of the United States. All I have to do is look at presidential campaigns, because it gives me enough stuff, enough ideas that I don't have to make anything up. I can just use that. And that's so true, is that people have this perception that House of Cards, actually people ask me all the time, is House of Cards real? And honestly, it is. I mean, the backstabbing, the philandering, the manipulating, and I have a phone call that I'll turn off. It's my agent calling, telling me I'm fired, is what it is. So, but I mean, it's all true, and it all, and so in American politics, you really don't have to go very far to really get some very exciting stories about the political process. And so, when we talk about this lecture, it's called Fact, I guess Farce, Fact, and I got to remember this name, Farce, Facts, and Forecasts. I mean, if you can, the craziest thing you can think about American politics, if you think about it, it's probably true. So, there's this, how many of you guys can tell me the name of the president in House of Cards? Anybody? There you go, Frank Underwood. Frank Underwood has this saying, he says, the road to power is paved with hypocrisy and casualties. And it's so true when you look at American politics. I mean, the greatest example of hypocrisy is, you have the Republican Party. And by the way, to digress for a second as far as my background, I've been involved, as Matt said, 5 presidential elections, worked in the White House. I've been around politics. I've worked in, the reason I know about Guyana is that I ran the presidential election in Guyana this last cycle. I've worked all over the world. And I actually find working in international politics to be more satisfying these days, because I really do believe there's a greater opportunity to make a fundamental difference and transformational change working internationally than in the United States. But, as a Republican, which is primarily what I've done, Republican politics in the United States, to me, there's nothing that's more hypocritical than you have the Republican Party saying, okay, Donald Trump, you can run. Come on into our party and run as a Republican. And now all of a sudden they're saying, oh no, you're not a Republican. Okay, we don't want you as part of the party. And I think it's just, and I'll talk more about the party structure and how Donald Trump came to run as a Republican. But the hypocrisy there is, as a Republican, and actually I have a hard time calling myself a Republican these days, or a Democrat. It's very difficult to imagine in a country of 380 million people that we have 2 political parties basically representing us. And that's something I'll talk about as well. As far as the casualty part of his quote is, I mean, if you look at Donald Trump running, I mean, there were more candidates running in the Republican primary or running for president as Republicans than any other time in American politics. I mean, they were all pretty much establishment individuals. You had the Patakis, you had the Bushes, you had the Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. You had all these individuals, and a lot of them I personally liked. But they couldn't get, as far as the casualties, they couldn't get the time of day, because Donald Trump, because of his personality, all the media was focused on him. I mean, in America, being so large, unless you have hundreds of millions of dollars to run for president of the United States, early on you count on that free publicity, that earned media to get your name out there. And Donald Trump monopolized. I mean, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, they all, even some of the foreign press, I don't know how it was here, but from like Al Jazeera and others, Donald Trump was basically the only person you ever saw on TV or on radio, heard on radio from the presidential cycle. And so what the casualties of that is that so many good quality candidates who I truly believe would have made a better president. And I just have to say this. I mean, even though I'm not, I will give you my opinion based upon politics. But personally, I'm not a Donald Trump supporter, just so the world knows. So no one will throw stuff at me before I get too far down here. But I do want to talk, a couple of things I want to do. I mean, I'm going to kind of go through who are the cast of players. Who is actually currently involved in the political process, the presidential election. Then I'm going to talk about our wonderful nominating process, how we got into this mess. And then I'm going to talk about our wonderful nominating convention, I'll give you some pearly words of wisdom about who I believe will be the next president of the United States. And just as far as a disclaimer, I've been wrong about every prediction I've made this election cycle, so we'll pretend it's opposite day, so whatever I say, the opposite is probably going to be true. So in this election cycle, you had, if Donald Trump had not gotten into this race, it'd be a totally different race. It would. You had, everyone thought about Jeb Bush. A little vignette here is when I worked for the first Bush. We say Bush Sr. And when I worked in the White House, there was this little bar around the corner called Old Ebbitt Grill. For any of you people have been in Washington, D.C., or if you ever go to Old Ebbitt Grill. It's a really cool place. But when we'd leave the White House, we'd go over there, and George W. would come in there, and his brother Marvin, and Jeb, and Doro, his sister, and they'd come in there. But I spent a lot of time drinking with George W. Now, he doesn't say he drinks, but back then he was not a teetotaler, as they say. And he was a great guy. He really was. But when he was elected governor of Texas, all of us who knew him kind of chuckled a little bit. He's Texan, great. And then when he became president of the United States, we were, not that he's not a nice guy, but we all thought that was quite entertaining that the electorate would vote for George W. to be president of the United States. And once again, as far as full disclosure, I'm a big John McCain supporter. I worked on his 2 presidential election campaigns, so it was a little disheartening when we lost. But Jeb Bush, I also used to spend time with Jeb Bush. He's a great guy. As far as policy is concerned, as far as being able to run a country like, I now live in Florida, and he was the former governor there. And everyone I run into in Florida, they thought he was a great governor. They did. And so I think that personally, he would have been a very good president from the standpoint of just managing. And listen, Jeb Bush and George W. are about as different as night and day. Okay, there are no similarities. And where George W. He has a fun personality. But policy, in my opinion, he's lacking. But Jeb has he has a very meek personality, which is one of the reasons he didn't go very far in the election. So you had Jeb, then you had of course Ben Carson, very nice gentleman, but definitely was way out of his league running. Chris Christie, how many of you guys have heard of Chris Christie, governor of New Jersey? If you'd watched the political commentators 2 years ago, Chris Christie was going to be the next president of the United States. Well, let me tell you, there is no way in hell, can I say the word hell in here? There is no way in hell that Chris Christie was going to be president of the United States, because he has this bombastic attitude that may have played well in the New England states like New York and New Jersey, but was never going to be president of the United States. I'm going to go through the Republicans, and I'll come back to the wonderful Democrats. Ted Cruz, who's still in it. Carly Fiorina. Honestly, if you look at the early polling, like who people wanted for the next president, if you take Carson, Trump, and Fiorina, they were getting almost in all cases over 50% of the support. And listen, it had nothing to do, honestly, with their policies or what they believed in. It's just the American public, they wanted somebody different. They wanted a non-establishment individual. And we'll talk more about how that plays into Donald Trump here in a minute. But Carly, she's a great, she was a big John McCain supporter. I used to travel with her, extremely smart. She got a bad rap at HP. But I tell you, she would have been, I really think that she would have been a good president, to be honest with you. But once again, it goes back to she's a casualty because Donald Trump had so much free publicity that she could never, ever get into the limelight or the media to cover. And the other interesting thing is, I have a lot of friends who work in the media world, and there was this concern early on, like among CNN and MSNBC and Reuters and all these, that there were so many people running. They didn't have the staff to cover all these people, right? And so there was, this underlying theme that they had, the media themselves in some ways kind of limited the field because they only covered certain candidates, and which really hurt, more of the down party candidates, I would say, like Pataki, former governor of New York, so forth and so on. So the media themselves, not that I'm a conspiracy nut and anything like that, but they did have a role in limiting the universe of the field of people running for president. Then you had Rand Paul, who everyone from a libertarian standpoint thought Rand Paul was going to be, and listen, Ron Paul, his father, great guy. Rand is a good guy, but he's definitely not his father. Marco Rubio, we'll talk about in a second. There's others, so forth and so on. And then there's, on the Democratic side, of course, there's Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and you have Martin O'Malley, who finally left, who's the governor of Maryland. I knew Hillary when she was Secretary of State. I did some stuff for the State Department. And Bernie reminds me of our grandfather. Okay, he's a great guy, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. And my son, who's 22 years old, loves Bernie Sanders, okay, because my son likes to be given everything. He thinks Bernie's going to give him everything. So, and I have the conversation about how are you going to pay for it? Oh, I don't know, but I want it. I want it free. It's just, I don't know. How many people here have millennial kids? Anybody? Okay. And I find that most millennials, right, as much as I love them, they're definitely have a different political ilk than I am. Then, of course, you had Scott Walker, who is the darling of the Republican Party. One thing you'll notice about Republican politics is that the darling changes like every 3 months. Okay, it does. And, of course, then you have Donald Trump. Like myself and basically every other consultant and anybody in any universe thought that Donald Trump running for president was a joke. We all predicted that he'd be around. He wouldn't even make it to the first primary, right? And then some people think, that he was doing it, and I think he himself never had any illusion that he'd be president of the United States. But the media, the people who gauge the value of media in the United States, they were saying that by him running, his name ID, his brand was increasing by $1 million a day. And then, of course, he's a businessman. That's why I'm sure. I'm not sure, but I'm relatively sure that that's why he was running. But when Donald Trump, Roger Stone, who was working for Donald Trump, and by the way, let me just, in America, as large as we are, basically, people who run political campaigns, there's like 20 of us who really are involved. It's like we get recycled, okay? And so Roger Stone, he was Lee Atwater's partner. How many people have heard of Lee Atwater? Okay. He was a great political strategist, worked for the first Bush. He basically created underhanded politics, and dirty politics, to be honest with you. But Roger Stone advised Donald Trump. And there's this vision in my head, Roger Stone sitting at a table with Donald Trump in Trump Plaza, such a beautiful place that it is, and sitting around and having this discussion about, okay, I want to run for president. Do I run as a Democrat, an independent, or a Republican? And I can see, at least this is what I would advise Trump. I would say, you can't run as a Democrat because, Hillary Clinton, you can't go against Hillary. She's the heir apparent in the Democratic Party. You can't beat her. Running as an independent, honestly, no one will give you the time of day. It'll cost lots of money. You won't be allowed to be involved in the presidential debates. You'll be considered a spoiler if either the Republican or Democrat won. So you can't run as an independent. So you should run as a Republican, primarily because there's 16 other people running. All you have to do is get, you don't have to get 50% majority when you're running. You just have to get a smaller number of votes. And so run as a Republican. And so that's really, honestly, why he made the decision. Because, listen, Donald Trump is not a Republican. Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat, okay? But in America, and I'll talk about this here as well, the two parties, the Republicans and Democrats, they're basically like monopolies, okay? They control the electoral process. And really the only way you could have a shot at the presidency is running as a Republican or Democrat. Now, we have other parties, ballot access, which we'll talk about in a second, but we have the Libertarian Party, Green Party, Socialist Party, Nationalist Party. And what's interesting is, we do have a socialist party, and Bernie Sanders is a self-avowed socialist. So I'm not going to sit here and say he's a socialist because I think he is. He's a self-avowed socialist. So people argue, why didn't he run under the Socialist Party? It's because he recognized, just like Donald Trump did, that he wouldn't be taken seriously. He wouldn't have access to the media. He wouldn't have access to the Democratic debates. And so he would get nowhere. So when Donald Trump decided to run as a Republican, as I said, we all just kind of chuckled and said, okay, you know, he's you know, a flash in the pan, as we say. But then, you know, as I said, I'm a big John McCain supporter. And then when he came out and Donald Trump said, hey, John McCain's not a war hero, then we all thought, okay, then he just totally, within the Republican ranks, just destroyed himself. Well, he survived from that. And as a side note, you know, I did this, I was at a, don't hold Sarah Palin against me, okay? I mean, you know, just she's a nice lady, and we, you know, I'll take whatever questions you want about Sarah Palin. And no, it's not true. She and I did not date, okay? I just want to make that very clear. You know, I always wonder if the chuckling is because I don't think I'm worthy of dating her, or is it just, listen, I'm better looking than Todd Palin any day of the week, okay? But when I first met John McCain, in 1996, I was working on Phil Gramm. I mean, he was a flash in the pan, too. He was a senator from Texas, a great guy. He was running for president. And John McCain was supporting it and had endorsed Phil Gramm. And so we were in a van going to an event, and I had never met Senator McCain before, so we're sitting there. And I'm just, you know, trying to make small talk. You know, I'm not, you know, I never met him. And I said, and I'd like to say I'm a golfer, but I hack. I'm not really a golfer. And so Senator McCain's from Arizona. And for those of you who may have been to Arizona, I mean, there are great golf courses there. It's beautiful weather. And so I said to the senator, I said, you know, hey, what's a great golf course? I mean, where do you go golf? I mean, I love John McCain. I really do, for many reasons. But he went off on me and said, don't you know, I can't play golf. I can't lift my hands of, you know, I can't swing a golf club. Because as a prisoner of war for 5 years, I mean, he literally was hung up like this for 5 years. And he's developed extreme, thank you, it's a big word for me, and being from Alabama, extreme arthritis, so he can't lift his arms above his head. So he can't swing a golf club. And when I travel with him, he can't tie his tie, he can't comb his hair. So anything above this level, he just can't do. And so when Donald Trump, and actually the other thing, I was, during the McCain-Palin campaign, I was at a fundraiser in New York City. We were back in the holding room, and it was McCain and Cindy, it was the McCains and the Palins, and Donald Trump came back there, along with Elizabeth Hasselbeck. Anybody know who Elizabeth Hasselbeck is? I mean, her husband was a Washington Redskins quarterback for a while, but she was on this show called The View for a while. Big Republican. Anyway, so we're sitting back there, and Donald Trump was talking to John McCain about what a war hero he is. Like, oh, I applaud your efforts, you know, for sacrificing on behalf of the country, all that kind of stuff. So when he came out and said, okay, John McCain, you're not a war hero, I mean, that really upset a lot of people. And plus, it was just hard to say, I mean, John McCain sacrificed a lot for the country. Now, whether he's, you know, you make your own determination about whether he's a war hero or not, but he sacrificed a lot for the United States and for America. And so he should have been shown some respect. So that was upsetting to a lot of people, but he survived that. Okay, and then of course he went on to talk about, you know, how from Mexico all Mexicans who come to the United States are, you know, rapists and drug dealers, and he survived that. You know, we should build a wall. He survived that. And then he talks about, okay, we should have a religious test before anybody can come in the United States. Well, first of all, I don't know what world people are living in to think that's even possible to do. You know, but he survived that. I mean, and then, and I'm only talking about this because it just shows, I mean, then he talked about Syrian refugees, about how we need to ban all Syrian refugees from the United States. And then, my favorite, I tell you, I don't know if there's any Putin lovers in the audience, but I'm not. So when he said Putin was an amazing, wonderful guy, that concerned me, especially at the same time when he's saying Donald Trump is not a war hero. So that was something that concerned not just me, it just concerned a lot of people. And I'm not talking about the general public. I mean, there are Democrats who would think that some of those comments are okay. But we're talking about the Republican primary and getting the Republican nomination. So in the Republican world, not in the general masses of the United States, but in the Republican world, those are the kind of things that we're thinking, hey, how on earth can he get support and votes? And then when Mitt Romney came out and gave his speech about what a terrible human being Donald Trump is, I mean, I have to say, listen, I know Mitt Romney, he's a great guy. He didn't do the party or anybody any favors by coming out, but he personally felt that he needed to cleanse his soul and come out and say these things. But after he said that, I mean, listen, from a Republican standpoint, I mean, for Trump to say afterwards that he could have had Mitt Romney on his knees, okay, begging for an endorsement. I mean, it's, just the crassness of it. I mean, it bothered a lot of people. But the point being that we all thought that he was doomed, okay, that he was done, he was toast. And I have to say, from a political standpoint, he's been masterful. He's been masterful from the standpoint of how he got into the process, how he's manipulated the process, how he's manipulated the media. I mean, listen, he's been masterful in that regard. But also, I want to talk a little bit about his base of support. If you look at the polls, I mean, people say, well, and he likes to talk about, well, I've received 2 million more votes than anybody else in running in the Republican primaries. In American politics, we have, I don't know how it's done here, but we have, we gauge, when we run political campaigns, about voter propensity. And I mean, honestly, there's not enough money in the world to go after every single voter to say, hey, I'm a great person. There's just not. So when we do polling and when we spend money, we do what we say. We want medium to high propensity voters, which means that we take the last 4 elections. Like if it's for a primary election, we say, okay, did this person vote in at least 2 of the 4 last general elections and primaries, which means there's a 50% chance they're going to vote. Or if it's in a general election, we say, how many of the last general elections did you vote in? And spending money, what we do is that we typically vote on those 2 of 4, 3 of 4, and 4 of 4 voters because we know that they have the greatest chance of coming out to vote. And so Mitt Romney, really honestly, is a segue. I mean, Mitt Romney honestly thought he was going to win because all the polling, and when you poll as well, you poll on 2 of 4 voters. Okay, you say, hey, are you going to vote for me? And of those 2 of 4 voters, Mitt Romney was winning in every single state. So he was sitting there on election night saying, oh, I'm going to win, I'm going to win, I'm going to win. Of course, he didn't, and he was shocked. And the reason he was shocked is because Barack Obama, by every stretch of the imagination, should not have been reelected President of the United States just because of his popularity, so forth and so on. But he ran a masterful campaign because what he did, he went after low propensity voters, okay? He went after these people who have never voted before, people who had voted in one election, so forth and so on. Of course, he spent $1 billion in his election, so he had a lot of money. And then also, I tell you, you couldn't go anywhere in any major city in the United States without the Democratic Party registering people to vote. I mean, it was impressive. It really was. So when he was polling and the money he was spent, he was focused on low propensity or non-voters. And that's how he won. And he knew he was going to win because he had been polling those individuals as well. But that goes back to Donald Trump because Donald Trump's support in the Republican Party is coming from low propensity voters. And he's drawing those out, okay? Which is why he really has received more votes than any of the other Republican candidates because you look in states, especially in the South, which is more conservative, you see this element of society coming out to vote for him that, normally would stay home. But what Donald Trump has done, I mean, just like everywhere in the world, okay, is that, there are concerns, right, wrong, or indifferently. The perception among Americans is that, hey, I don't have a job, so why don't I have a job? Now, I'm saying this, I'm not saying that this represents my view by any stretch of the imagination, so please don't construe that Dane Waters said this, is that they feel like, okay, we've lost our jobs because the Mexicans are coming across the border, okay? And listen, there are a lot of reasons our economy and people are losing their jobs. I mean, is there reason, is that a legitimate reason or not? I mean, I don't personally believe so. But people say, I don't have a job because Mexicans are coming across the border. So when Donald Trump gets up there and say, okay, we're going to build a wall, we're going to keep them out, they say, oh, right, we're going to get our jobs back. And then, then these, and listen, I'm from Alabama. I mean, I don't know if you guys know what the term redneck is, okay? Alabama is the biggest redneck state. I mean, I'm really I'm a redneck. I mean, it's probably the only suit I own, and I had to dress up to be here. But I can understand fully, like my mom and dad, they love Donald Trump, okay? They do. I'm not invited back for Christmas because I talk poorly of Donald Trump. But that segment of society who are concerned about Muslims coming in the United States, who just basically honestly feel that every Muslim in the world is just an evil person who's going to like blow you up. When Donald Trump talks about keeping them out of the country and applying a religious test so that no Muslim can come in the United States, that's a segment that he's going after, and it's resonating with him. Okay? And I mean, he's an entertainer. So the things that come out of his mouth, I mean, listen, I will sit here and say, Donald Trump has the right to say whatever he wants to say. I mean, we have a system of free speech. I welcome that, and I'm actually glad that people can go out there and say whatever they want to say in a free society. I absolutely 100% don't agree with anything that's come out of his mouth. But he's going after this segment of society and saying just whatever he has to say. And he doesn't believe in any of it, honestly. I don't think at the end of the day he really believes in this stuff, to get them out to vote. And the other thing is reason why he's getting so much support is that the American public, they're just angry. They're so sick. I mean, you hear this every election cycle. They're sick of the establishment. They're sick of the same people running all the time. But honestly, they are sick. They are fed up. They are tired. And if you look at Washington and also state legislatures, it's the most polarized it's ever been. Because what's happening is the way our party process works. I mean, it's complicated, very different in every single state. But the state party chairs in these states basically control who the nominees are. And they become more polarized because at the end of the day, it's those, I'll use the word zealots, it's the Republican zealots, it's the Democratic zealots, the people who are hardcore on the right and on the left who control the party apparatus. And they are the people who decide basically who the congressional candidates are, who the U.S. Senate candidates are. So when they get to Congress, Congress is polarized. I mean, over the last 8 years, Republicans and Democrats are as much to blame. Nothing has happened. I mean, we can talk about Obamacare. I mean, we can talk about the president. We can talk about whatever. At the end of the day, nothing's happened, okay? And all the American public and certain segments see is that polarized, nothing's happening. They're losing jobs. The economy's going down the crapper. The world is being blown up by Muslims, whatever. So this is what people are thinking. They say, okay, Donald Trump, A, he's an outsider. Plus, they think that he's this great business person because, you see Trump's name on everything, including your socks and underwear. So they think he's a great person. And so, that's why he has been able to get as far as he has gotten. So let's talk about kind of where things stand. Our nominating process, we are the only country in the world, where I, as a taxpayer, I pay for the Republican and Democratic primaries, okay? And which is very frustrating to me is that I have friends in Florida that I had convinced to support John Kasich, and for full disclosure, I'm a John Kasich guy. And so they went to the polls to vote for John Kasich in the primaries. They were told they couldn't because they were registered as Democrats. Okay, so they're taxpayers and they're paying for the Republican primary, yet they're not allowed to vote in the Republican primary. It's outrageous. Our nominating process is outrageous. Donald Trump exists because I, as a taxpayer, allowed him to exist. Okay, because if we didn't have a public nominating process, he wouldn't get any airways, he wouldn't be out there. But I think that, and that's how the Republican and Democratic parties maintain their monopoly. Because every election cycle for president, the Republicans and Democrats are the only people who have these public nominating process. The Libertarian Party, Constitutional Law Party, American Independent Party, the Reform Party, whatever it is, their primaries aren't paid for by the taxpayers. They're not. And it's because state laws, individual state laws, these lawmakers who are made up of Republicans and Democrats vote to say, okay, we will use tax dollars to pay for the primaries. So this debacle you're seeing, this circus that you're seeing, it's all a gift to all of you from I as a taxpayer, okay? So if you want to blame anybody, blame us. But if you put all that aside, honestly, I'll be happy to answer any specific question about how the nominating process works. But for the Democratic and Republican parties, it's different. For every state, it's different. But at the end of the day, to be the Republican nominee for president, you have to have 1,273 delegates. Okay, Donald Trump has roughly 1,000, and I can tell you the exact numbers if you want. Ted Cruz has roughly like 500, and Marco Rubio, who's out of it, has like 171, and John Kasich has about 145. And the whole thought is, okay, if you get to the convention, and on the Democratic side, we'll talk about Bernie and Hillary here in a second. Let me just make it very clear. There is no way in hell Bernie Sanders is going to be the nominee on the Democratic side. Okay, it's just not going to happen. Hillary Clinton, and it's not a conspiracy. Okay, it's not. I'm not a conspiracy guy. But Hillary Clinton has paid her dues to the Democratic establishment, has been out there campaigning them forever, which is why they created this whole superdelegate strategy. So she could end up at the convention with the same number of delegates as Bernie Sanders, but with these superdelegates, which basically are not elected. They're just people who say, hey, I like you, Hillary. With those superdelegates, there's just no way she's not going to get the nomination. So for those of you who want Bernie Sanders to be the next president of the United States, or to have a Bernie, what did you call it, a Bernie, you want to have a Bernie relationship with, who's your, Corbyn. Sorry to say, hey, listen, anything's possible, but there's a greater chance of me getting a date with Kate Beckinsale tonight than for Bernie Sanders. And she was supposed to come to, didn't you invite her? Didn't you invite her? And she turned me down. I can't believe that. So anyway, that's on the Democratic side. So Hillary's going to be the nominee. Let's just live in that little world over here. But on the Republican side, Donald Trump, the whole thought process was that, okay, if I can rack up and get to 1273, the way the nominating convention works basically is that the first round of balloting, as a delegate, you are obligated to vote for that person from your state. So if you had 1,273 delegates going into the first round of balloting, you would be the nominee, okay, because you're bound. And the Republican National Convention Committee, they change the rules every election cycle. But the rules would be that, I mean, pretty much if you have those delegates, you're going to be the nominee. But in my estimation, Donald Trump will not have 1,273 when he gets to the convention. Okay, I mean, just looking at with John Kasich in it, who's a more moderate candidate, who pulls, actually, as Donald Trump says, he pulls votes from Donald Trump. He does. So because John Kasich is in it, honestly, Ted Cruz should be happy, even though complaining about John Kasich being in it. John Kasich, honestly, being in it is keeping Donald Trump from getting the nomination when you get down to it. So after the first round of balloting, the second round of balloting, 50% of the delegates are free to do whatever, okay? So anything can happen in the second round. I mean, I like to say, I mean, I know John Kasich quite well. I mean, you know, if all these candidates have egos. We should put a sign up, no ringing, right? No. It's like in a movie theater. Do you have movie theaters here in this country? I guess you do, right? That's a stupid question. Do you have movie theaters? Am I in Guyana? What kind of question is that, you know? Do you have indoor plumbing? I just want to know, who has indoor plumbing in this country? I tell you, I don't like going to movies. I know I feel bad like I'm picking on you, but I'm not. I promise. I know, it's just like, it's time for, it's like the Dane shut up alarm. Is that what it is, you know? But no, it's one of those things. I have a hard time going to movies these days because with these phones, everyone likes to be on their phone when you're in the movie these days. It's kind of, and I'm not picking on you, I'm really not. And I forgot my train of thought. No, I'm just kidding. Rewind the tape so I can see what I was saying. But no, I mean, so the second round of balloting, 50% of the delegates are free, and I think that if all these candidates, to run for office, you have to be the biggest narcissist in the world. Okay, it's just the reality. And this is not John Kasich, Ted Cruz. They all are have egos, believe it or not, as huge as as can be. If John Kasich can get over himself, even though he said he would never take the VP slot to Ted Cruz. If he does that, then on the second round of balloting, Ted Cruz, if he teams up with John Kasich and then Marco Rubio falls in line, which he probably would, then Ted Cruz on the second round of balloting could be the nominee. Okay? Which is what my prediction is today. That it's going to be, drum roll. It's going to be a Cruz-Kasich ticket, and I think Marco Rubio is going to be promised Secretary of State because get his delegates, so, that kind of thing. If that doesn't happen, then it's going to be a free-for-all, honestly. After the second round, all the delegates are free to do whatever they want to do. What's interesting, people think that, okay, there's no way a Trump delegate's ever going to vote for anybody else. Well, the reality is, it's not like Donald Trump personally picked you, okay? It's like if you've won 52% of the state, 52% of the delegates go to you, it doesn't mean that they even like Donald Trump, to be honest with you, at the end of the day. So there's no guarantee that they're going to not leave. So at that moment in time, that's what John Kasich is hoping for. John is hoping that, okay, if he doesn't go with Cruz, that after the third, fourth, fifth round of balloting, that people are going to see that John Kasich is the consensus candidate. He'll get the nomination. And honestly, if you look at the polling, John Kasich is really the only one who theoretically can beat Hillary Clinton. There's absolutely no way, once again, I've been wrong a lot, I would say to be president of the United States, you know, we don't go by popular vote, we go by this antiquated electoral college, right? And so in order to be president of the United States, you're going to have to be able to pull, if you're a Republican candidate, minority votes, African American, Hispanic vote, women, every demographic that Donald Trump has pissed off, okay? So there's absolutely no way Donald Trump can be president of the United States, okay? So what we're going to do is that we're going to offer up him to be the ambassador to the Court of St. James, so you guys get him after the election. So don't worry about Donald Trump being president of the United States. Ted Cruz, I mean, the polls show that, I mean, one thing that's a fallacy in the United States is that you see these national polls, right, about Donald Trump is polling this, you know, Hillary's this, Ted Cruz is this. You know what? National polls mean absolutely nothing in the United States because you have to win the electoral vote, right? So which means you have to win, in order to win California, you have to win Los Angeles, San Francisco. In order to win Florida, you have to win Miami-Dade County. In order to win New York, you have to win New York City. Okay, so what really you have to look at the polling based on congressional district, which no one ever really does. That's the only way you can get a true sense of who's going to be the next president of the United States. So if you look at Ted Cruz, even though he wants to talk about his Cuban ancestry and all that kind of stuff, I mean, I think he has a greater chance of beating Hillary. I still think it's going to be Hillary, if it's a Cruz-Hillary, even if it's John Kasich as the VP. If Kasich's the nominee, I think he'll give Hillary a run for her money. But if, you know, being a betting man, I would say right now that the most likely scenario is that it's going to be a Cruz-Kasich ticket up against Hillary, and I have no idea. Actually, I do know who it is. I mean, I don't know who it is, but there's, and I can't remember the name, but there's, in the Democratic Party, there's this darling in the party. He's Hispanic. He is mayor of Houston, and his brother's a member of Congress. I can't remember the name. What? Something like that. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think you're actually right. Most likely will be her running mate, okay? And that's going to be a hard ticket to beat, to be honest with you. So I would say that Hillary Clinton is going to be the next president of the United States. So, you know, you can go home, don't listen to the media anymore. It's what's going to happen. You know, you heard it here first. There's a lot of things I didn't cover, so I just want to close by, wow, there's a lot. There's like 7 pages here I didn't go through, so I'll have to. I mean, so what does all this mean? I guess how to sum it up. I think that what's going to happen, wow, I wrote so many funny stories here, Matt, that I can't even get to. To sum it up, I mean, this is truly going to be the most historical election in U.S. history. I mean, you know, you hear that every election cycle, and, you know, Bush-Gore is the most historical. But no, this is, to me, it's like the stock market in the United States. Every now and then there has to be a realignment of the stocks, right? And I think this is going to be a realignment of how the political process works in the United States. The political parties, I mean, this is definitely with Donald Trump on the Republican side and Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side. I think that there's going to have to be a come-to-Jesus discussion at some moment in time with these parties about, you know, should there be a loyalty test? Listen, Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, for this matter, don't support a single piece of the Republican or the Democratic platforms, okay? So it's hard for them to say that they're Republican and Democrat. It's just that, hey, I could walk up and run as a Democrat, you know? And so the two political parties, honestly, out of this whole fiasco are going to have to come to terms with how do we allow people to run for president. The second thing I think you're going to see is a change in the primary system, because I think this whole thing about us as taxpayers paying for this primary system, I think most people, first of all, most people in America don't even understand it or realize it. I think that's going to change, and I think they should go back to private nominating, you know, basically at private conventions to nominate their candidate and then just have a general election. And I love the fact that, I mean, I would limit it like most countries do to a political season of, I don't know, 3 months, 4 months, not this never-ending political cycle. I think you're going to see, I wrote on here, need for multiple parties. Well, you know, we technically have multiple parties in the United States, but ballot access is a problem. For example, if you look in Pennsylvania, if you're a Republican or Democrat running, you have to collect just 2,000 signatures to be on the ballot. If you're a Libertarian or a Green Party, you have to collect over 30,000 signatures to be on the ballot. That's because Republicans and Democrats control the state legislature, therefore they try to limit and maintain their monopoly. So I think you're going to see pressure to allow independents and more third-party candidates, but that's going to require a fundamental change in the way the ballot access process works. Now, as a side note, I'm a huge believer in direct democracy, which is how Matt and I know each other, and I think a lot of these reforms that I'm talking about can only take place through direct democracy through the initiative and referendum process. You know, you're going to see changes like nonpartisan redistricting. The way it works now is if you're a Republican legislature, I mean, every 10 years we do a census in the United States. And based upon that, every state does redistricting, basically deciding, you know, to make sure that, you know, 500,000 people basically are for each congressional seat. And they do what they call gerrymandering, where they draw these lines such that a Republican is guaranteed to win, or a Democrat's guaranteed to win, okay? So there will be a change to nonpartisan redistricting, so allow Libertarians, Green Party, Constitutional Law Party, others to have an opportunity because it's not guaranteed to be Republican and Democrat. And I will say that tomorrow, just so you know, tomorrow is Thomas Jefferson's birthday, okay? How many people know Thomas Jefferson? What? Not everyone knows Thomas Jefferson? I don't believe you have indoor plumbing if you don't know who Thomas Jefferson is. But, no, he was one of our founding fathers, wrote the Declaration of Independence. I mean, you know, no matter whether you're Republican or Democrat in the state, in the country, you support and love Thomas Jefferson. But he has this comment that he likes to use. Well, he's dead, so he doesn't like to use it anymore. But when he was alive, I'm sure he went on every street corner saying this, a little rebellion every now and then is a good thing. And I agree with that. I mean, you know, in any democracy, you need to shake things up on occasion, right? And I think what you're seeing, you're seeing the seeds of that rebellion. Not that it's going to be, you know, armed rebellion, even though every one of us has like 20 guns to ourselves in the United States. But I think that what you're seeing are the seeds of that rebellion. And I think based upon this election cycle, those seeds are germinating. And I think from this point forward, you're going to see a fundamental change in electoral process in the United States. So that's all I have to say. I appreciate the time, Matt, and thank you very much. So.
And there's a microphone here. Thank you very much, Dane. That was most entertaining and enlightening.
I'm glad it was entertaining and not enlightening.
I will be entertained the other way around, but it's good to be both. Are there any questions, or does anybody want to ask a question? Otherwise, I can ask the first question. There's a gentleman up there, so I'll just go up with the microphone.
No, it's fine.
Shout.
You were saying that Trump and Sanders have to go with Republican and Democrats because otherwise, apart from various other things, they won't get any media coverage. Here we have quite tight rules about how the media conduct themselves during election periods, during the pending period, we call it. So they have to be fair, they have to name all the candidates and things like that. Do you have anything like that? Because it strikes me that if you can't change that, the coverage problem, then that's one of the two big reasons why you're not going to get the change that you obviously want.
Well, you know, once you're a nominee of the Republican and Democratic parties, then the media has what they call equal access or fair access. But only if you're a Republican or Democrat, like for example, MSNBC or CNN, they can't only cover you. They have to give equal time to the other candidate as well. That does not apply to Libertarian candidates, Green Party candidates, or anything like that. They're not given that equal access. At the same time, also, during the presidential debates, and you saw this when Ross Perot was running back in '92 or whenever it was, third party and independents are excluded primarily from the presidential debates. So yes, I mean, you know, that's the fundamental problem is that, you know, the media they're obligated to focus on Republicans and Democrats only after the nominee. Prior to that, they can do whatever they want to do. They can charge, you know, like MSNBC covers Donald Trump pretty much all the time and so forth and so on. So. That needs to change, and the only way it's going to change, honestly, elected officials currently aren't going to change that, which honestly goes back to whole direct democracy. People say it's a terrible tool in some ways, but I think that's the only way. I mean, I'm a huge supporter of it. I think it's the only way you're going to bring about transformational change in the political process in the United States.
Thank you. I thought that was really interesting. I guess I was interested, you mentioned that women as minority voters, and that kind of, I picked it up on immediately.
I said minorities and women. I didn't mean women or minority voters.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so it was okay.
It's my southern slang. I talk so fast, you know. So.
Okay, I thought you meant that women
No.
are seen as minority group in voters. But okay, thanks.
Listen, I learned a long time ago, don't piss off the women in the audience, okay? I learned that, so.
Isn't that what Trump's done?
He's pissed off everybody, so you know, there's no doubt about it. Which, as a side note, you know, he talks about after he won some of the primaries, he says, I love women and I love the uneducated, okay? Because he's a sexist pig, which is why he loves women, honestly, you know, it's kind of interesting. And I think somebody, not to go off on a tangent, somebody talked about why does the Christian conservative base in the United States support this man, even though he talks about women in sexist terms and he wrote a book about how many affairs he's had and all this kind of stuff. But it's because, I mean, it's because most Christian conservatives would support anybody who bashed Muslims, to be honest with you. That's that. But no, I didn't mean to put women in the minority category. I've been married 3 times, so therefore, you know, they're definitely not in the minority in my life. So, you know.
Can I just add a couple of quick questions?
Sure.
If that's okay. Thank you first of all for a really fascinating talk. I appreciate it and learned a great deal. I prefer West Wing to House of Cards, but that's more about my politics.
I understand.
Two things that you didn't mention, if you don't mind, that I'd like to just offer some comments on. When Barack Obama was first running in 2008-9, we saw the genesis, I believe, of what became known as the birther movement.
Oh, yeah.
And I wondered if you could just offer a few comments on what that was and whether that was significant. And then, secondly, I remember when I was in Washington DC some time ago and stumbled across a Tea Party demonstration.
Yep.
And they heard my English accent and somebody looked at me and said, in absolute seriousness, they said, we understand that you have a communist healthcare system in the UK.
Yeah.
And so I said, no, we have a national healthcare system. And so I just wondered why the issue of free at the point of use healthcare is such a contentious issue in the States.
Good questions. First of all, about the birther issue, I mean, it's for those of you, I mean, to put it in simple terms, there was this, if you don't know, which I'm sure you do know, that, you know, Barack Obama, in the United States, you can't be president of the United States unless you're a natural-born citizen. And there's this thought, I mean, you know, Donald Trump's talked about it, others have talked about it, that Barack Obama was born in Kenya, so therefore he can't be president of the United States. And that, you know, this conspiracy theory about how his birth certificate, you know, he claims he's, well, I don't claim, I mean, he says he was born in Hawaii, and maybe he was, maybe, I don't know, I don't care, honestly, when you get down to it. But they say that his, you know, birth certificate was doctored, blah, 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 blah. You know, you can read all this conspiracy now. So there's a lot of people who feel, even to this day, that he shouldn't be allowed to be president of the United States. Now, that birther issue has raised its ugly head this election cycle. And what's interesting, though, John McCain was born in Panama, okay? He was not born in the United States. But he was born on a military installation. His parents were, his father was the Admiral of the Navy, so forth and so on. And technically, the way the rule is, if you're born on American soil, or both your parents are American, therefore you are an American. John McCain said both my parents are American, and I was born on a military installation, which by law is American soil, right? But John McCain honestly didn't make an issue of the birther issue. It was everybody else, all the Tea Partiers and people of that nature. And in many ways, I personally, my personal thought, and I'll probably get beat up about this. Listen, I think we're getting to a point where that rule is kind of antiquated in many ways. You know, there came up this session where people were arguing that Ted Cruz was born in Canada. Even though he's of Cuban ancestry, I mean, he said, I can't remember, his parents or grandparents were from Cuba, like Marco Rubio. But I mean, the big issue came once again, you know, he can't be president because he's born in Canada. You know, are there any Canadians here in the audience? No? Good, because if I were president, I would invade Canada and take it over. So, but it's a beautiful country, that's why. So no, that's the birther issue. As far as healthcare, it goes back to just a lack of understanding. I mean, there are absolutes in the world. And one is that Republicans like to talk about doing away with, we call it Obamacare, it's the Affordable Care Act. Let me tell you, it's not ever going to happen, okay? And I don't know, I mean, the Republicans were so nutty, as a side thought, they were so nutty to shut down the government until Obamacare was defunded. It was never going to happen. I don't know what they were even thinking. But people, there's this underlying thought in America that anything that is socialist and or communist, which I would argue that most Americans don't even understand what those terms mean, okay, that they're opposed to it. And the national press, in many ways, called it a socialized system, national healthcare system. And the average American was just opposed to that because they think, okay, that's just one step to nationalizing everything. The next thing is going to be, you know, our industry is going to be this, going to be that. It's really because of a lack of education when you get down to it. Listen, for a full disclosure, as a Republican, I have my own business. I'm part of the exchange, okay? I'm part of Obamacare. To me, it's a great thing because, well, there are certain nuances. I can't just overstate that. I mean, there are differences about self-accountability and all that kind of stuff. But I can see why it's got value in the United States. I mean, I guess I'm a soft-hearted Republican where I believe that if it's our individual responsibility to take care of our elderly and our children and all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, if we don't, then I think government should step in and take care of those who can't take care of themselves. Doesn't mean I'm not, it doesn't mean that, I mean, a lot of my Republican friends think I'm evil for that. I'm like, what, are you going to let these people die on the street? Anyway, it's a totally different story. But that's why. I hope that answers your question.
One thing that I think has been significant in previous elections, which you probably have touched on, is security. How do the frontrunners rate in relation to security, especially given emails that are linked to Hillary Clinton?
You're talking about national security, or are you talking? Yeah.
Terrorism.
Yeah, you know, I think it resonates. I mean, every time there's a terrorist attack in the European Union or around the world. I mean, what's interesting is, you know, the Paris and Brussels attacks we know about, we hear about. I mean, but there, as you all know, there are terrorist attacks all over the country, whether it's Kenya or whether it's, you know, Tunisia, or wherever it may be. But, you know, those never make the public domain. Let me talk about Hillary Clinton and her emails. She is not, I mean, once again, I say these things emphatically as if I know and I see some crystal ball. I'd be a wealthy man if I did. Hillary Clinton is not going to get indicted over emails, okay? There isn't even laws on the books. I mean, the laws on the books are that if you send out top secret emails to people who don't have top secret clearance, that is illegal. There is nothing illegal in the United States about somebody sending you a top secret email. You can't control what somebody sends me. I mean, people send me stuff all the time that I wish they wouldn't send me. So she's not going to get indicted, right? Yeah, I won't talk about what it is, right? I mean, I think where Clinton, just as a side note, I think where she has greater potential liability is on the Clinton Foundation and taking money from foreign governments. I think that she has great exposure there. Now, will she get indicted in some way between now and the general election? I think it's extremely doubtful. And I don't agree personally with the president coming out the other day basically saying there's nothing nefarious about Hillary Clinton and her email. Even though I personally don't think there's anything there, I just think it's wrong for the President of the United States to go out there when there's an FBI investigation to come out there and say that. I think that's fundamentally wrong. But security and terrorism is a huge issue in the United States, which goes back to this whole issue why they like Donald Trump about there's this thought that if you're a Muslim, you're going to come kill us, okay? Okay. I mean, listen, I spent a lot of time in the Middle East. I mean, listen, there are a lot of Christians that are, you have just as much chance as a Christian killing you as a Muslim killing you in the United States, okay? And actually, if you look at statistically, more people are killed by Christians every day than Muslims or Jews. I mean, it's just, it's an asinine argument as far as I'm concerned. But, Trump is playing on people's fears. They are. And listen, my father, I mean, of course I love my father. I do. But he's about as big a racist as there is. Okay, he is. I mean, he's from Alabama. I mean, I was working in Mississippi on a project to remove the Confederate symbol from the Mississippi state flag. And for those of you probably do know, the Confederate symbol was created during the Civil War, and it basically had to, celebrate slavery. Okay, And Mississippi is the only state in the union that has it in their flag, and I was working because I just believed that it was just wrong that you have a symbol that offends 62% of your population. So, and I told my dad about it. Actually, I was quoted in the New York Times, right? And I had to tell my dad that I was working on the campaign after it came out in the New York Times. My dad went off on me. He says, basically, he really did say, don't ever set foot in my house again. That's what he said. And then, so he finally softened on that a little bit. And then I went to see him the other day in Alabama. And I started talking about how much I dislike Trump because of his view on Muslims and religious tests. He said, we need to have it. We need to keep every Muslim out of this country. And I'm like, Dad, it's not, first of all, it's not even possible. You can't even do it. I said, there's probably more Muslims coming across the border working with the drug cartel than there anybody asking for asylum in this country. And I said, it's just not fundamentally right. And he says, well, we will never be secure until we abolish and ban every Muslim from this country. He said, I would rather ship every Muslim out of this country than the Mexicans. But he said they'd be next. So that's my dad. But no, I think that those people who, Republican or Democrat or anybody who talk about the importance of limiting Muslims coming to the United States, I think it's just fear-mongering in my opinion. But it's a big issue, resonates with a lot of voters. And of course, at the end of the day, it's about trying to get people out to vote for you. So. Yes, sir.
I have a few questions. The first one will be somehow just a follow-up to what you just said. By looking at the issues covered in the nomination process, both by Democrats and the Republicans, what do they say about the American society today? You gave the example of your dad, but in general, because the kind of the perception we have in a way is rather scary.
I'm scared. What are you talking about? I understand.
The way some of these issues are covered, about Muslims and minorities, etc. Can you just reflect on that? And the second one, you said that you are pretty sure that Hillary Clinton will be the next president.
Yes.
Under her presidency, what kind of United States of America we should be expecting in global politics? Would there be much change from the Obama era? Thank you.
These are legitimate questions I have to think about. The first part, well, let me just answer the second thing first because the reality is if you're president of the United States, you have very limited impact on domestic policy. You do, okay. So you can go out there all day and talk about you want to build a wall or whatever, and I'll talk about it here in a second, but you just can't do it. It's just not going to happen because you had 535 members of Congress who are polarized, and honestly, they make the laws, so forth and so on. But where the president of the United States has the greatest impact is on foreign policy. And even though, I'm not a Hillary Clinton supporter by any stretch of the imagination, but one thing about Hillary is that you fundamentally know foreign policy-wise where she stands, okay? Whereas Donald Trump giving nuclear weapons to Japanese and all that kind of stuff, first of all, I don't think he's going to do any of that stuff, but, not that he can. Like, we're going to ship a nuclear bomb and give it to Japan. Or build a wall, like that's really going to happen. And really, like, we're going to have the Mexicans pay for it. But as far as foreign policy is concerned, I think that when Hillary's president, I think it pretty much will be a continuation of the Obama foreign policy, which is, for me personally, is sad. Because I think that the Obama foreign policy has been abysmal at best, especially when it comes to Middle East issues. Not that I'm an interventionist, not that I think we should need to go blow up everybody, but I do have personal opinions about the growth of ISIS and how some of that lack of foreign policy has led to that and destabilized the world. But I think that honestly that, the one thing about Hillary Clinton that I will say, and most people who are in the Republican circles talk about, is that she's a known entity, right? And from a foreign policy standpoint, whereas Ted Cruz, who scares the living bejesus out of me, because, as a side note, the difference between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, Donald Trump doesn't believe in anything. He makes it up as he goes along. Ted Cruz believes in all the stuff he talks about, okay? Which makes him scarier, in my opinion. But anyway, that's a long answer of saying that about foreign policy. And I don't think you're going to see a fundamental change with Hillary Clinton as president, which, once again, concerns me. As far as what this election cycle and the issues, at the end of the day, being in the political world, the reality is, every American has a limited bandwidth about the issues that you can tell them about. Okay? And in politics, I tell my candidates that what we need to do, we need to find 3 to 5 issues and hammer those home. The 3 to 5 issues that resonate with the voter. So you know what? Because in America, and like other places, there's a billion things you can talk about. So if you look at security, you look at immigration, you look at racial issues. If you're a Republican, I mean, you're going to see a total transition in the general election between who's the Republican nominee because they have to pander honestly to the Democrats as well. But in the Republican primaries, those are the issues that resonate with Republican voters. You basically scare the bejesus out of you, thinking, okay, every Muslim is going to kill you. Racial issues about Black Lives Matter and basically trying to put minorities in their place or whatever it may be. That's why you see these issues in the Republican primaries that are being discussed. To me, honestly, one of the greatest issues we have as a country is our $17 trillion in debt. I think that that's going to impact us more so than anything else. And it used to be in the 80s, that was a huge issue people talked about. But it's not sexy anymore. Most Americans don't care about $17 trillion of debt. Most Americans are in debt anyway, and they live every single day, so they don't think it's a bad thing. But unfortunately, the issues of the day that you hear about are the issues of the day that we as political consultants have gotten together and polled and said, okay, these are the issues that you need to talk about that will resonate with the American voter and get you the votes necessary to be the nominee. So I don't know if that answered your question, but, Or what does it say about us as a society?
Yes. If you don't mind.
No. Shows that, I don't know, it says a lot about us, honestly. It shows that we're very, listen, I'm just going to throw it out there. Americans are very self-centered, okay? We are. We think we own the world. Overgeneralizing, okay? I'm sure there are exceptions to every rule. But think we own the world. Everyone should listen to what we have to say. Nothing impacts us. So what you're seeing as far as these issues, and also the depth of understanding. You can walk pretty much in any coffee shop in America, and you can say, what is your number one issue? They're going to say, keeping the Muslims out. We're going to say, okay, what does that mean? Why? They can't answer it. Just like in America, you go up and you say, okay, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. I say, why? Well, I don't know, just my mom was a Republican and I don't like, Barack Obama. So what it tells us, what all this stuff tells you about Americans is that we are not a deep, this sounds really bad, but we are just not deep thinkers when it comes to these issues. We are very emotional voters, okay? That's what we do. And if you look at every election we've had, it's based on emotion. It's not based upon the facts. And I think that, if I had to sum it up, I think that this just shows that we are emotional voters. We focus on the emotional issues. We do not learn the facts associated with it. Once again, it talks about building a wall. Can we build a wall? No. Are the Mexicans going to pay for it? No. Is Bernie Sanders, are we going to give free education to everyone in the United States? No, it's just not going to happen. Donald Trump, are we going to apply a religious test? Like we're going to make you ask you what your religion is when you come to the country? Is that going to happen? No. These things are not going to happen. No matter how much you like them, they're just not going to happen. And that just shows us as Americans that we vote off emotion more so than the facts. So.
Big fan of the West Wing. So contribution. I heard it said once upon a time that there was a move for Martin Sheen to be president. And bouncing off your last comment about emotionalism, do you have a comment to that?
Yeah, for full disclosure, it sounds greater than it actually is, but I did advise on the West Wing a little bit here and there. Honestly, and you guys may know this, but when the West Wing was first written up as a series, President Bartlett was just going to be a small character. Okay, he wasn't really going to be anybody, but the American public loved him, so that's why his role grew and grew and grew and grew. And I think there was a period of time where more people knew President Bartlett's name than they did know, Bill Clinton's or whatever, or Dan Quayle's definitely more than Dan Quayle's name. No, I think that Martin Sheen and President Bartlett are not the same person, okay? I think I would vote for Charlie Sheen. I'm just kidding. But there's this movement. I mean, people live in this fantasy world about emotion. There was a period of time, honestly, where people talk about how Josiah Bartlett would be the best president in the world, but of course it's not going to happen. People live in this fantasy world about, like they create in their mind who Donald Trump really is. And they create in their mind who Ted Cruz is and Hillary Clinton is and all that kind of stuff. And listen, honestly, after being married 3 times, one thing I learned, if I learned anything, not to be married again, is that, if you go into something wishing somebody to be a certain way and they don't turn out, you're going to be disappointed. I mean, all these people are wanting Donald Trump to be somebody, and he's not. They want Ted Cruz to be somebody, and he's not. So I don't care who's elected president of the United States. People are going to be disappointed with the election result. So I hope that answered your question.
If a lot of Americans, apparently, I always like the Americans I meet, but I suspect I only meet, mostly I meet the ones who come here, and I suspect they don't. But I'm told that during the first Gulf War, a lot of Americans thought it was being fought in the Gulf of Mexico. I do remember a previous election, Americans getting upset because we had opinions about who they should elect, but it does affect us. So you tell us the main role of the president is foreign affairs, and I've just given you my little bit of prejudice about how much Americans understand about foreign affairs, and I think that applied to W as well. You've been abroad, have you? So
On a drinking bench, but no.
yeah.
Just kidding.
If he doesn't have much to do with domestic politics, why do Americans care who gets made president?
Well, it's about perception. I mean, when I say they have, from a regulatory, the way the president of the United States has the authority through regulatory action to do certain things, right? And that's like you've seen Obama, because of his frustration with Congress, has passed more regulations through executive order than any other president ever has. It's because can't get anything through Congress. The perception among the American public is the direct opposite of what I said. They think that the president has more impact on domestic policy than they do foreign policy. And so I think that's why, most Americans, you're right. First of all, we're a country of 370 million people, and when you see these people who don't know where the Gulf War is in the Gulf of Mexico, that's true, but if you talk about it, that's maybe one, a small percentage. But most Americans honestly are stupid when it comes to geography and world affairs. They are. But I think that, as I said, most Americans think that the President of the United States is going to enact health care him or herself, that they're going to lower taxes him or herself, that they're going to build a wall him or herself. They think that they have this ultimate control and power, which they don't. It's just a perception issue. So.
And is scandal accurate?
The scandal?
Yeah, you talk about
Oh, scandal?
My daughter watches Scandal. Is it accurate?
That she's having an affair with the president? It depends on what you're talking about accurate. I think there are a lot of accuracies in Scandal. I don't watch it as much as I do other shows, but I think there's a lot of accuracies. Is she running into the West Wing and having an affair with the President of the United States? I would argue not, but no, there's a lot of accuracies to that. Listen, our government's just like your government. Does our president lie to us? Of course he does. There's certain things we just don't know, and it just doesn't make sense for us to know. It's just a fact of life. And so I don't have issues with the President of the United States not being totally forthright with us about certain foreign policy issues. Domestic issues, I can't find of any reason not to lie. Now, if there's a giant meteor about to strike Earth or asteroid, do I want to know about it? I have mixed emotions about that. But anyway, politics in the United States is truly one of the most entertaining things that they'll ever watch.
Right. Okay, turn it on. Well, any more questions? And if not, then, that's first of all, I suppose. Any more questions?
I'm heartbroken. I counted on like 12 questions, and it's only been like 6. So.
Yes, please. Which will be the last, by the way.
Oh.
A small announcement.
Who put you in charge? I'm just kidding. You are in charge now. That's right.
I suppose it's looking beyond this election. And if say Donald Trump is a candidate and he loses to Hillary Clinton, you may see quite a divided society in the United States. Certainly you get the feeling there is a divided society a great deal of anger that people should describe following Donald Trump. Let's say that Hillary Clinton becomes president, and there's a great swathe of society that have believed in something quite strongly under Donald Trump and then left alone. Looking towards the next election and the future of American politics, will there be a unifying candidate? Will there be is there somebody in the Republican Party who will bring people back together, or is this a division, split?
You know, it's an interesting question. I ask my friends, and I myself ask myself this question: that in the Republican Party, who's your role model? Okay, who do you look up to? And the answer is we can't think of anybody. I mean, Ronald Reagan wouldn't get the nomination in the current Republican Party. He wouldn't. Will there be a unifying candidate in the next election cycle? Well, just as a total side note, if it's Donald Trump on the ballot, the repercussions are going to be far greater from a political standpoint than just the presidency. And we have our down party candidates. And what's going to happen is that I do believe that Republican senatorial candidates will lose, Democrats will win, and so Democrats will get control of the U.S. Senate, which will help Hillary Clinton and the policy, so forth and so on. I don't personally see a unifying candidate in the Republican Party. I don't see, I mean, people talk about Speaker of the House, I forgot his name, Paul Ryan, thank you. That's what happens when you get old and senile. People talk about Paul Ryan being a unifying force. He's not. I mean, chances are he's going to run in the next election cycle. But it's sad to say that there really isn't anyone at any level within the Republican ranks, and I'm very tight in the Republican world, that I see as a unifying force coming up. And I see that, once again, it's so polarized. I mean, the people, I talk about state legislatures because there's a percentage of state lawmakers that become members of Congress. And little trees grow up to be big trees, right? These polarized creatures are going to grow up and be polarized, even more polarizing in Congress. So I wish I could sit here and give you some example of an individual. I think as long as Reince Priebus, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, as long as Reince Priebus is chair of the RNC, you're not going to see any changes. I think you're going to have a total shakeup in the Republican Party. But once again, I don't see a unifier. I don't. And which is going to take a while for us to find that person who's going to come and unify the party. But I'm also a believer that the party needs to break up. I think the party needs to, if it wants to be conservative, be conservative. If you want to be liberal, be liberal. You can't be a moderate party in the United States. You really can't. And our primary system shows that as well. So I don't have an answer for you, but I think that this is the turn, this is the change. And I think just like anything, any crisis, somebody steps forward at some point in time. And I'm hopeful that somebody's going to step forward and help lead the party back to where it could be.
Thank you very much, Dane, and thank you for coming all the way from Florida. For those of you who need more than the sustenance of wisdom that you have provided them, there is also slightly more old-fashioned kind of sustenance upstairs. There will be little refreshments. You go out this way. Then I think Mike will lead the way. I think we should just give Dane a hand of applause.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.